morning and welcome to this edition of San Diego People. I'm Paul Rudy. Over the last 2 months, Congress has passed $3.6 trillion in stimulus spending, with more money likely on the way, all due to COVID-19. Does that mean more taxes could be on the way to pay back that money? Well, this week we spoke with KUSI contributor and AM 600 KOGO radio host Sully Sullivan about the future of our economy. Here's what he had to say. The money's going out, but money has to come in to replace that money going out, does it not?
Well, eventually something's going to give. I'm calling this, you've heard of the Great Depression, you've heard of the Great Recession. I'm now calling this the Great Repression, because we did this to ourselves. We had to, though. I mean, let's face it. You had to stop this economy in order to flatten this curve, so to speak. But during the last 2 months, Congress has passed $3.6 trillion, as we've been talking about, in stimulus spending. There's probably more on the way. Washington's annual deficit, think about this, was around $1 trillion prior to COVID, and now it's $3.7 trillion in deficit. This debt year, by the way, will be the highest since World War II, probably higher if there's more stimulus spending. And look, there's only three outcomes, and we've talked about this a number of times. Three outcomes when you flood the economy with dollars out of thin air, like we are witnessing with incredible velocity from the Fed. Number one, the government would have to raise taxes to pay for all of this. Number two, the government would have to stop spending money. I think we know that's not going to happen. Number three, the government would have to monetize the debt by purchasing government securities low, selling them high. That's also known as quantitative easing or a repurchase program. Look at every country does quantitative easing, which is basically printing your own money to buy your own securities. That's how we fund the Fed. We're just the least dirty shirt in the hamper. So long story short, likely it's going to be number one and number three. Likely they're going to raise taxes and they're going to do quantitative easing. And that's the sad reality of it all.
So if you're a president who got elected partially on the tax cut he gave everybody, are we going to have to kiss that tax cut goodbye?
Yeah, very potentially. There are some taxes we could be facing if they could repeal the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. That was a landmark tax cut. Remember, we were the highest taxed country of any industrialized nation corporate-wise. We were at 39% all in. If you think in terms of if you're a CEO of a publicly traded company and your responsibility is shareholder value and you can do business cheaper in another country, that's why we lost a lot of companies here in this country. So if that corporate tax rate went back to where it were, and the tax rates for most Americans who got a tax cut during the Jobs Act came back, that would only raise around $1 trillion a year. So I'm not sure that's going to be the answer. I think the answer might be a value-added tax. I know that's just a horrible outcome for many of us, but frankly, most advanced nations have a VAT tax, which basically is like a national sales tax that's imposed various points in the production of goods and services. So like a 10% VAT would raise around $1 trillion per year, but Congress would have to design it with protections in place for low-income Americans and small business. And of course, last of all, there's a wealth tax. They could raise income tax. Look at if we don't do something like that, you're going to see hyperinflation or a devalued dollar, which makes, frankly, gold pretty attractive during times like this.
Well, that's where I wanted to go with this conversation. Ever since I've been a little boy, we've been talking about deficit spending, and the perils of it, and yet all we do is more deficit spending. And our country, at least until 4 months ago, 6 weeks ago, was doing pretty darn good as it related to the economy of the world. Is there really a downside to all this federal deficit spending? I mean, well, we keep talking about the wolf.
It's largely psychological. This is why I'm calling this the Great Repression versus anything else. Because look, we were singing. We were singing. San Diego home prices were up. Right here in San Diego, we had low unemployment, lower than the national average. We were at a 60-year low here in San Diego, and we were at a 54-year low in the country. Every single metric of the economy was there prior to COVID. This is manufactured COVID economic repression. We had to do it. Here's the problem, Paul. It's not going to turn on like a light switch. It's going to turn on like a sunrise. right? I mean, you need to think in terms of that, because we are all clawing at the door to get outside, and we're all clawing at the door to go back to business as usual. And I believe we will get there. And I think there will be some sort of a new abnormal. I don't like calling it the new normal because it's anything but that. But it's not going to be flip it off like we flipped it off and flip it back on. And I keep on using this example because I think it's necessary. Here in San Diego, something like 67% of restaurants are shuttered. I can tell you, when things go back, 67% of restaurants are not going to open up. You're going to see attrition here. And again, as it relates to your deficit spending idea, that is the way of all of the world, not just the U.S. And again, I have to remind us that even though it feels like 2008, 2009, it's not due to any bad actors on Wall Street. We're not bailing out corporations here. We're doing fiscal stimulus for Johnny Lunchbucket and Cindy CEO and you and I.
Thank you, Sully. Employment and the numerous issues facing both employers and employees continues to rise. An employment law attorney weighing in on the issue right after these short but important commercial words.